Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Herpetoculture, the inconsistently released show where I, Lucas, take a deep dive with other keepers who have far more knowledge and experience than I do in the world of herps. Today, I'm extremely excited to be talking to a fellow Aspideides lover, Kasey from Zion Hill Exotics. Kasey has, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful collections that I have ever seen, particularly when it comes to the Woma pythons. But she also works with Sailfin Dragons. I think I've seen olive pythons, ring pythons, blackheads, frilled lizards, and probably a whole bunch more other stuff. We'll dig into it. But Kasey, thank you so much for joining me today. And how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Just bear with me. I might be a little awkward on this, but I appreciate it.
No worries. I always constantly feel the same way. That feeling never leaves. But you're going to do great. And I'm so happy to have you and be talking with you today. So I guess let's just dive right in. I would love to know a little bit more about your background and what you do and kind of how you got into this world in the first place. What was your reptile journey like?
Well, it's not the traditional, I was born loving reptiles. My family had reptiles. I, being completely honest, was petrified of snakes growing up. I remember being out in the creek in the back and almost breaking my leg at one point trying to dodge I don't even know what snake it was, probably a little garter snake at one point. And my husband was in the military. He was stationed out in Washington State. And when he was working during the day, I was staying in his dorm, and his friends who were working night shift, they'd get together and play video games. So I was going over to their dorms playing video games, and someone had an iguana. And looking back, this is not how you should treat an iguana.
Okay.
But his name is Paco. And he'd just sit on our shoulder while we played video games, and you had to wear sunglasses because he'd whip his tail into your eyes. I mean, this doesn't
makes it hard to do well in the game when he's whipping you in the eyes, right?
Exactly. But I fell in love with him, and I was in college at the time, so I couldn't get, an iguana, something larger. I ended up getting my first reptile was a leopard gecko. Nice. Then it turned into a bearded dragon, which I would consider the two gateway reptiles of the hobby.
Sure.
And then it just kind of went off from there. I saw my first Sailfin dragon in a book. This is like the most non-traditional reptile background.
No, that's awesome. And it sounds like it started a lot with legged critters first.
It did. Okay. No snakes. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. I saw a Sailfin dragon in a book, and I was just, as anyone would be, blown away by it. It took me 2 years to find one, and I finally found a juvenile. And then, like I said, it kind of just went from there. I started collecting everything. I got Woma pythons, frilled dragons. I had Sailfin dragons, ball pythons, bearded dragons. I mean, I feel like we all go through that stage where you just gather way too much stuff. Yeah. And then you hit a point where you're like, okay, what do I really want to work with? This is overwhelming. I've got myself in over my head. Right. And so over the last, 5-6 years, I've kind of refined my collection to just now working with Womas, Blackheads, Sailfin Dragons. And then I have a couple other things randomly placed throughout my collection. I have an olive python, a ringed python, like you mentioned. I just picked up a pair of Sumatran short tails, which I'm excited about.
Awesome.
But I'm kind of in a place where I want to know a lot about a little as opposed to a little about a lot. So totally. I love
that's kind of the core three, the Aspideides and the Sailfins.
Exactly. So I'm trying to focus all my attention, learn as much as I can. Pretty much, there's no such thing as perfect, but really try to better my husbandry skills with both of those species. So
that's awesome. That's so cool. And, to be completely honest, those Sailfins, yours on Instagram were the first that I had ever seen, period. Like you said, you saw them in a book for the first time. I saw yours and I was like, that is literally a dinosaur. And it was like one of the craziest. I had to look it up and see if it was a real animal or if you had like glued a sail on like something.
They don't look real. I've been keeping them for a long time, and I had one of my females out yesterday. and I still look at her and I'm like, I have this, like,
Yeah, like
this is mine.
if they just slapped one of those things in Jurassic Park and just kind of skipped all of the special effects, people would have bought it, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, they're so amazing. And both the Womas and the Sailfins, there's not a whole lot of information out there on them. So
right.
that's also one of the reasons why I just want to kind of focus on those two things so that I can hopefully gather more information and share it with others. Just like there's some other people in the hobby I know are really into the Aspidites that are doing the same thing and helping other people along the way get species in their own collection or specimens in their own collection, as well as learn more about them, breed them, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So it sounds like the sailfins, did those come first before any snakes for you?
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
That's so cool.
when they said, I mean, I tell people looking back now, anyone who asks me about sailfins, like, they're not a beginner reptile by any means, but I got them as a beginner. And I say that now because I've made a lot of mistakes and learned from the mistakes. And that's why I'm able to keep them. But I don't want other people to have to go through that. Like, it
Sure.
really was not something I should have had as my first reptile, to put it simply.
Well, I hear that, and definitely I feel like that's something that happens pretty often when people are really captured by an animal and really passionate about something, and they're just excited and they jump in head first. And I wonder, do you feel like because you were so fascinated by them in particular, that even though you didn't have a ton of experience, do you feel like that kind of maybe even helped you a little bit? Like maybe you did a better job with them than you would have with quote like a beginner reptile because you were more interested in them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you could say the same. Any hobbyist could say the same, that you have things that you're passionate about. And it's not that you care less about things in your collection,
Mhm.
but you focused more time and energy on learning about them, caring for them. And yeah, I mean, I've had bearded
Totally.
dragons, leopard geckos, cared for them, did what I needed to do. They, they were healthy, but certainly did not try and, what can I do next with enclosure? What can I do next with diet? That type of
Mhm.
thing. It was you constantly learning and being excited with the sailfins. Same
Right.
with the womas. And I mean, that's why I still have them and will keep them for hopefully forever.
Right. And with this the sailfins, and we're definitely going to dive into the Aspidites stuff. But before we get there, with the sailfins, you're kind of saying that there's not a ton of information out there, which I totally believe that because there's
Yeah,
probably not a lot of sailfins out there. Um,
there's
but
not.
was right. So like when you're starting out with a quote beginner reptile, a leopard gecko, your bearded dragon, whatnot, you can totally just download a bajillion different care sheets and it's going to be like do A, B, C, and D, feed it this, do this, and everything will be all good. But see, a problem with that, in my view, is that you're spoon feeding new people and they never have to think about natural history or why things are that way. So, when you were getting into sailfins, did you struggle to find that kind of information? And did that kind of push you towards actually having to think about that kind of stuff and figure it out yourself?
Yes. And comparing it to the womas, because that's something else that, like, there's not a whole lot of information out there on them. There is like a care sheet
Sure.
with Sailfin Dragons. I think the only care sheet that exists is Scott Corning. I mean, he is the sailfin guru of the United States. He, I believe, was the first one to ever bring sailfins into the United States. Don't quote
Okay.
me on that. But the last update on the taxonomy of sailfin dragons was in 1911,
Oh.
and the most recent one was in 2020. So when I got into it in whatever year it was, there's not even like historical scientific articles on the internet about them. I mean, there's nothing. There was an article from 1911. Like, that's what I was finding online. And
Wow.
there's people overseas that keep them. There's pictures on the internet. If you Google, sailfin dragon, that's typically what comes up. We have, like I said, Scott Corning, a lot of his pictures are on there. But as far as pictures, information, history. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of any of it out there.
Right.
And I think that we need, moving forward, need to get more information on the internet for people, even if it's just, can you hear that in the background?
A little bit, but it's okay. What is that?
So it's my Sailfin dragon. I'm gonna put her, is this a part we can just like edit out?
Absolutely,
I'm gonna put her
no
in
problem.
the bathroom because she's just like, that's all I can
She's chomping.
The history, yeah.
History. Not a lot of information. Yeah,
not a lot of information.
Did you find yourself reaching out to that small select group of people that were working with them a lot, or was it more kind of trial and error stuff, like on your own? Were there people there for you?
No, really on my own, and not because I didn't want to reach out to people, but because when I started working with Sailfin Dragons, when I started with reptiles in general, I didn't have a social media page. I didn't have an Instagram. I didn't know there were Facebook groups. I did this totally by myself. I had no idea that there was expos. I had no idea. I mean, this is like, I started knowing nothing at all. And then I found out that there was one of the biggest reptile expos, the Hamburg Reptile Expo, right, about 30 minutes away from me. And then, that was like, holy crap, other people like reptiles too.
Right. Yeah. No, that's funny. So iguana in college at video game party.
Yes.
Leopard gecko, bearded dragon, sailfin dragon.
Yep.
All legged things. How did we learn to accept the legless ones? How did that happen?
Question. You can't deny that snakes are amazing. I mean, when I started getting slowly into the Facebook groups, that kind of stuff, once I realized that this was a hobby, that this is a thing, that people keep reptiles. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, we look at us now, but
right. There are others. They're out there.
Yeah, there are others. And just looking at them on the internet, seeing people interacting with them, just, they're amazing animals. And I just kind of fell in love over the computer, as to simply put it. And I got my first pair of ball pythons.
Okay. And
fell in love with them. Just totally fell in love with them. And then my second snake was a Woma python.
Nice.
So again, going from nothing to like, not that Woma pythons are advanced, but even Googling how to care for one, history, all that kind of stuff, you have to dig around to find what you're looking for. It's not like Woma Python 101 comes up on your computer.
You do have to dig, and my experience at least was that I found a lot of conflicting information too when I started doing that digging. Was that true for you as well?
Yes, very much so. As far as just like the way people keep them, what to feed them. Like I've heard everything under the sun, even just because now I do talk to people, and even just talking to 3 different breeders, they tell you 3 different things. And I came to the conclusion that there's a lot of things that work for Woma pythons. I believe that there's a lot of different ways to keep them. They're pretty hardy animals too. Mm-hmm. So, take that as you will. It doesn't mean you're going to mess them up, but
absolutely. And that's such a great point, and kind of a recurring theme. I feel like the more I talk to other keepers, is that, like Eric, my friend Eric always says, it's not like baking a cake, right? There's no recipe for success. That there's probably hundreds of different recipes for success depending on the species and where you're at and what you're doing. So definitely a great point there. So definitely we have that Aspidites obsession in common. I think that it's super great that you just went straight for the Womas after the ball pythons, because I did the thing where I knew they were what I wanted, like I was obsessed with them, but I was like, no, I can't do it. And then I got like corn snakes and rosy boas and all these other things that I wasn't into until I finally actually gave in and just surrounded myself with Womas. So what is it for you that makes the Womas and the Blackheads too, if you want to speak on that, so particularly fascinating, and what drove you to jump into them before anything else after the ball python?
I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, they're physically attractive. That's probably, number one. the fact that there's something appealing to me about not knowing a lot. With the Sailfins and with the Womas, looking back, I'm in a pattern of being attracted to things that not a lot of people are working with. So I think that probably had something to do with it. In addition to, now that I know more about them, they're such an amazing species of snake for so many reasons. Like, I could probably talk for 6 hours about Womas.
Let's do it. No,
we can. And there have been studies done, over in Australia about their population and
right.
What they do naturally throughout a day over in Australia. We don't even know.
Right.
We there's so little known about them, and I think that sparks my interest, is that even in their native territory, the people there don't know a lot about them.
100%. No, I so resonate with that. Like, it makes it more of a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when we are into this kind of thing, there's so many different like arenas that are, potentially feed the passion, right? Like, some people are more into like the appearance, some people are more into size and whatnot, but I feel like you and I both kind of geek out on the unknown and the natural history and like the mystery of that kind of species where there's not a ton of knowledge, because even like you said, even the researchers in Australia have trouble figuring out what the heck they're doing all day. And then you see papers where maybe on the east side of the continent they actually climb trees, but there's no trees on the west side, so maybe they're completely different. It's that kind of thing. So I completely hear what you mean with that. And do you feel like you've been able to learn more about that kind of stuff through your keeping and through your observation? Do you feel you understand the species better now from having them in captivity than maybe what you did years ago?
Yeah, and there were some things like that, the fact that they aren't necessarily terrestrial, that they can be arboreal.
Yeah.
The digging, the burrowing, all of these things I noticed in captivity prior to reading the articles. You probably know the one article I'm talking about where they radio tracked them up in the trees.
Yes. For those that are curious, that's Melissa Brutton in 2013 or 2014. Great paper. Very cool. Yeah. Arboreality, excavation behavior, and radio tracked womas in the Brigalow Belt.
Yep.
Which was nuts. But yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
off. No, that's okay. But I mean, I noticed them doing these things and thought, like, that's odd, but okay. Yeah. And then I was reading these articles and I'm like, wow, I think there's some things we can do in our husbandry with these species to make it a little bit more naturalistic. It's not just the sand and a hide and a twig. It looks beautiful, but that's not necessarily where they're at. And we now know from other articles that I've read that they're not just arid, sand dwelling animals. They are in the rocks. They're in the spinifex. They're in, so many different places. It also makes it kind of exciting and fun because you can do so many different things with their enclosure then. Because there's really so many different ways that they live, in Australia.
Oh, 100%. And one of the things I wonder too is, unfortunately, us being in the United States, we don't really have a good idea of where our Aspidaites are actually from because, probably whatever came in and however it came in, probably shady, that all just got mixed together and not really well labeled. So I think about it a lot, how like if those Eastern animals and the Western animals and the Subwestern animals do have different natural history and are wired differently, maybe, that kind of makes it even a little bit more of a challenge for us because we don't know what we have. But maybe that's just, points for throwing the kitchen sink at them and letting them tell us what they want to do. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I don't think anyone knows the origin of the original specimens we have in the United States, but from some things I've heard, it was that someone thought they had two animals from the same locality, brought them to the United States. They ended up not being the same. So we don't have any idea what, the lineage of
Right.
any of the animals in the United States. And of course, you can't get them from Australia anymore.
Right. Yeah, and from
So,
some people that I've chatted with have said that there used to be like some more reliably locality specific stuff with womas and whatnot, but that back then a lot of people just didn't care.
yeah.
They would just mix them anyway, and that got lost. So
And that's something that's also so interesting about the Womas is the locality information. So I've been trying to study localities. I've embed myself in Australian reptile groups, as I'm sure
nice.
you probably
Oh
have.
yeah.
And it's between localities and morphs. There's so much variety with the Woma python.
Right.
We think they're just these banded animals that are yellow and orange, but that's not true. They have zebra lines. They have, we have some people in the United States that have their own lines. Like I think Dan Vermiglia, you got one from him. I don't know if he considers that a line, but it's like a high orange line.
It certainly could be. Yeah. I mean, the belly on that thing is like the orange layer of a candy corn. It's unbelievable.
And then the reduced pattern, and then you have the melanistic specimen, which I still don't understand that at all.
Yeah, what's up with that? That one hatched out this year, did it not? Somewhere in the States, I thought I saw.
Mike Schultz.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No relation?
No relation, and I tried to get one from him, but he's holding on to it, and I agree with that choice.
Yeah, that probably was an easy call, but hopefully he's able to try to crack that code a little bit. But no, you're absolutely right, and in addition to those variations, there might also just be some natural regional differences. Like I think I've read that those southern populations are the ones that were capable of becoming like 9-10 feet, right? And you know that when we think of womas, we don't think of that kind of size, but maybe that's just because of where the majority of the US stock came from. Maybe that was just kind of a smaller locality, but yeah, it's crazy.
I couldn't even imagine a 9-10 foot Woma. And speaking of a large Woma, I remember reading an article. It was about the reintroduction of the Woma pythons. It was a study that was done. I don't remember what part of Australia, but the 10 Woma pythons that they released into this reserve, they were all siblings, and the parents, I believe, were wild caught specimens. They were bred at the Adelaide Zoo and had 18 eggs. And I was just thinking to myself, 18 eggs? Like, what did that female look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is awesome. Like, you are my people, because I read that paper yesterday.
Really?
I did. Well,
what the funniest thing of that paper is that I was reading it when I was writing the article for the Herpetoculture magazine that I did like a while back, is that they were rewarding people with $100 fuel vouchers if they sent in pictures of Woma pythons. Like, how crazy is that?
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, no, that is crazy. And that study was kind of crazy too. And that reserve, I think they call it the Arid Recovery Reserve or something like that. They cleared it out of all the invasive predators, the foxes, the pigs, the cats, and reintroduced their native burrowing mammals, things like bilbies, which is fun to say. But I guess all of those reintroduced womas got eaten by mulga snakes within 4 months, which is just crazy. Like every single one of them. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, it makes you think. At least when I was reading that paper, I was wondering if maybe because they were captive born, they were maybe a little bit less sharp.
That's a very good possibility.
Yeah.
And I think it noted in that article that because they were released into that area as opposed to being born into that area, that they were uncertain of where to go, what to do, more so than if it was natural.
Totally. Which even that in its own right is fascinating, because how do the ones that were born there figure that out? That's just that points to a really heightened level of cognition, if you ask me, you know, knowing where your hazards are and remembering which holes are safe and which holes aren't safe. That's pretty good.
It's also a little ironic, not funny, but that people have this conception that, and I don't know if it's true or not, that the Woma python can digest venomous species of snake and not be affected by it, but yet a venomous species of snake killed all of these Woma pythons being released.
That's a great point. That's for both the Womas and the Blackheads. That's something that I've read a lot, but I've never been able to track it down in anything academic. Right.
Agreed. I've tried as well, and there's really no evidence that I can find that it's true, but I don't know.
Well, those Womas were not immune to anything. We can rest assured of that. But yeah, fascinating study, and it's awesome that you're also diving so deep into all that literature and whatnot. Like, I could geek out with you on that all day.
Trust me, I could as well.
Yeah, and there's not much. I'm sure you've been finding as well. There's probably less than 20 or 30 papers really in existence, unless you want to go back to like the early 1900s that we can.
Which I read those.
Nice.
Well, it's another interesting thing about the history of the Woma python is that they had subspecies at one point, which is crazy to me, that are not known. They're not recognized today because the guy that named them, I think it was Hauser. Am I saying that right? Raymond Hauser.
Raymond Hauser. Yeah.
He was naming them off of where he was finding them, their physical attributes. You know, there was no scientific evidence, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was Nia Davii, Richard Jones Eye.
Yes.
Ramsey. I'm not sure if that was one. And
Richard Jones Eye is the one that always sticks out to me. It's just like a hilarious attempt at taxonomy.
The Panoptes and Calaris. So I mean, they've been all over the place with trying to identify subspecies, and today we still don't have any. Same with the blackhead python. I'm
certainly no expert in taxonomy, but my understanding is that Mr. Hauser likes to publish unpeer-reviewed things that have no scientific basis, and his findings are largely rejected by the scientific community.
Did you read the one article that was talking about him specifically?
Yeah, in Scientific American.
It's a little brutal. Like, I was reading it and I was like, that's pretty awesome.
Like, you kind of have to respect the takedown. Like, it's good to just call out the bullshit, but also like it was brutal.
Poor guy.
Yeah. No, it's interesting though. I think that Calaris, or Calaris, however you say it, has a little bit more of a legitimate background. It's rejected, right? It's not used anymore, but
I believe that was the Queensland subspecies.
Right.
I don't remember, but
yeah, it's interesting. Taxonomy is just this whole can of worms, you know, in terms of deciding where you want to draw the line. And of course, people also speculate about Eastern and Western blackheads and whether they are different enough to warrant taxonomic designation as well. So I don't know. It seems like with Aspidites in general, the conclusion usually is we need more research, no matter what the question.
And for right now, we have blackheads and Womas, and that's it, nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. No, good stuff. Now at this point in the story, we have Womas, we have snakes, we have all these lizards, you know, you embrace the legless creatures. So has it been a challenge for you to maintain that sort of a variety of different creatures, right? Like obviously Sailfins and frillies and snakes are all probably very different in what you need to do husbandry wise. So how have you been able to balance all of that and kind of arrange your room or rooms properly, if you will?
It has not been easy. I mean, I don't really say much about myself on my social media, but it's me. It's only me. There's no one else. And I have a baby. I have a full-time job. So this is, you know, I'm trying to make it work as best as I can. And over the last year and a half, I've had to reduce my collection because I had a child. She's actually a year old yesterday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations and happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Yes. So I actually sold all of my frilled dragons because,
Oh, okay.
you know, making sure that I am taking care of them comes first. As I hope it to be for any breeder or keeper. And I was getting
Sure.
to a point where I just couldn't do it all anymore. So I unfortunately had to remove them from my collection. They're at new homes.
Is that how I lucked out with that beautiful Woma as well?
Uh, Not so much. I have too many female womas, which I can't believe I'm saying that that's a thing. Too many female
Good
womas.
problem to have, and you can
Yes,
always give me a call.
I definitely will keep you in mind. But the Sailfin Dragons alone, I mean, they drink their water, they defecate in their water, they swim in their water, so they need constant water changes. I'm talking like 2 times a day sometimes.
Wow.
So, that's a little bit different than changing a snake's water bowl once a week or however often you do it.
Nobody's doing that twice a day.
No. Sailfins are extremely high maintenance. If you're lucky enough, like GX3 has that amazing enclosure for their Sailfin Dragons. They have, I'm assuming, filtered water. They have the waterfall.
Waterfall, yep.
That's, minimal maintenance there. But for me, it's physically emptying and refilling like big Rubbermaid containers of water for them.
Right.
I did filtered water at one point, or a water
A
stream
circulation kind of thing. Yeah.
And it kept getting clogged because they go to the bathroom in it. And I said, screw this, I'm done doing that. They're just high, they're very high maintenance, they're very time consuming. I love them. And just feeding them as well, like with any monitor or lizard, you're making salads, it's trying to diversify their diet, constantly mixing things up, as opposed to feeding a mouse or a rat to a snake once every other week or once a week.
Right.
So it's a lot to just care for the Sailfins, and that's why another reason why I don't keep a variety of different reptiles. I try to stay to a couple.
It sounds like those will have your hands full.
They do have my hands full, and I'm not interested in letting go of them anytime.
Sure. And how big is that group that you're working with them?
So right now I have, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to think. I have
put you on the spot. Sorry.
That's okay. 2 adult male Celebensis. I have 2 juvenile female Celebensis. I have a juvenile female Microlophus. I have a couple, possibly either Celebensis or Microlophus babies. I have 2 female Pustulatus, 1 male Pustulatus, 1 hybrid. She's a cross between Pustulatus and Microlophus, and 1 tribrid, which is Celebensis crossed with Pustulatus crossed with Webbery.
Tribrid. I love that. I've never heard that. That's awesome.
That's Scott Corning. I think he coined that one. So, and I think he's the first person in the United States to do that as well, to crossbreed 3 species. So
nice.
But there's not a lot of people that are working with the Celebensis, and probably a small handful of people that have gotten their hands on the Microlophus. So I feel really privileged that I have what I hope are some breeding pairs that I'll be able to raise up and, produce some babies in the future. With that being said, they won't be babies for sale. Like, they'll be babies that I'll probably, there's so few of them that they're just not going to be given to people as pets. People ask me all the time, on my social media, do you have any for sale? I'm like, no. And if I did, I can't sell them. Sorry.
Totally. No, that makes sense. And that's awesome. And, pardon my ignorance, but for people like me that don't know very much about them, are those three subspecies, and are they from different locations?
Yeah. So there's 5. So this is in 1911. That was that article I was talking about, with the last basically revision on the taxonomy of Sailfin or Hydrosaurus. Right. And at that time, there were,
so good.
I know, I love it. There were 3 species. So it was the Amboyensis, the Webbery, and the Pustulatus. In 2020, they basically broke Ambonensis into Celebensis and Microlophus. So now we have 5 species.
Okay.
So most of them are from Sulawesi. Then you have the Pustulatus from the Philippines. And then, well, I shouldn't say most of them. 2 of them are from Sulawesi, and then the rest are still from Indonesia.
Okay.
So a lot of times people say like the big black Indonesian Sailfin Dragons. That's not necessarily true. It's really the Sulawesi ones that are the big black Sailfin Indonesian dragons.
Okay.
That makes any sense at all.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Do you have a favorite of the 5 recognized species?
I love the Celebensis. They're my big black one. His name's Spyro. He is, I don't know if you've ever seen Spike on social media from Mike Lorette. He's like the most probably well-known Celebensis that we have in the United States. He is the son of Spike.
Nice.
And I was lucky enough to get my hands on him, and he's humongous. And he's not very nice, but he's just beautiful. And then I have another male that's much nicer, actually lets me hold him and interact with him, but they're just stunning.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All of the ones, even though I don't know much about them, every time I see you post a picture about them, I'm just like, holy shit, is that real? You know, they're so pretty.
People are into the purple ones. You wouldn't believe how many
legs kind of.
Yeah, how many people message me, and I'm not giving anyone a hard time, but they're like, do you have any purple ones? Well, no, it's a Pustulatus. But they are the most well-known. We do have, quite a few. That's what Grant from GX3 has.
Right.
He has Pustulatus. Right. That's when people think of Sailfin Dragons, I think that's mostly what they're thinking of. And that's only one species that gets that purple. And it's not all the locales in that species that even get the purple.
Okay. So, very cool. Yeah, I'll be seeing those guys on Sunday. I'll have to take a tally of which ones are purple and which ones aren't. But that's awesome. That's fascinating. So, and I know at least with Grant, it's kind of a cohab situation with his group. Do you also like to do that with them? And is there kind of lines you have to draw where you can't put one subspecies with the other, or is it kind of just all a green light? How does that work?
So if I had an enclosure, I'm just using GX3's enclosure, for example, because theirs is amazing. If I had an enclosure like that, I'd think twice about, or I would probably keep them together.
Gotcha.
Of the same species. I have bred some hybrids and tribrids, but I don't think that that's really contributing to what we have here in the United States. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, but I'd like to see more of the same species being bred.
Totally. I get that.
Yeah. So I mean, I've done it. It's totally fine to do it. But right now, my enclosures are what I'm finding from trial and error, that they're too small to keep groups together. The only group that I've been successfully able to keep together are 2 females. And that doesn't mean that that's any 2 females. That just means that these 2 females have allowed me to let them be together. It's interesting because sometimes the females are the really dominant ones. They're the problem. It's not the males. They are, and you can tell that they're being dominant when you see the male at the bottom of the enclosure and the female is at the top at all times. And when there's food, she will push the male out of the way. I don't know if you saw, there was one video on my Facebook where the female literally shoves the male out of the way, which is funny, but probably not, that's not healthy. So when I breed them, I put them together temporarily and then I separate them.
Got it.
Another trial and error thing, which, people can give me a hard time for this, is that I tried to keep a male and a female together throughout the year. It was this year. And the male ate the female's eggs.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting.
Now I know.
Now you know.
I would have, there's not that much knowledge, out there about them. Lots of people keep them together, but for whatever reason, he dug up her eggs in the box and ate them.
Well, that's brutal. I'm sorry to hear that. But also, in terms of like people giving you a hard time, I would hope they wouldn't, because this is how we learn. And
Correct.
either we can shame people for that and then nobody learns, or we can encourage people to share their experiences and not get chastised. So nobody be mean to Kasey for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that's crazy. And that's not something that has seemed common for them, to eat their own children.
Who would have thought? I mean,
Yeah.
that would be the last thing that I would have thought, but there definitely are. I think if you have babies that you raise up or juveniles that you raise up together, it's fine to keep them together, but I'd say like under no circumstances should you keep pairs together unless you know they're okay. Because so Damien, the big guy that I have that you've probably seen on my page, he's massive. He's like 8 pounds.
Nice.
He's missing part of his nose because I guess, it was bit off by a female previously. There's all sorts of issues. Like I have a lot of adults that are missing digits on their hands and their toes. Not when I had them, but previously they were bred, and so they can be aggressive. And they, as a lot of other lizards do, they bite their necks. So when they're breeding, so some of mine are missing, the spikes on the top of their crest, and so
right.
I think, and the males, they want to breed all the time from what I can see. So I think it stresses the females out a little bit.
Gotcha. No, that all totally makes sense. Lizards are crazy. Lizards are a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, can we go back to Womas for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Return to Woma land. So you have now produced a few clutches of Womas. If I'm not mistaken, was last year your first year producing?
Last year, the first year I bred my Womas.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. And then we got a couple this year as well. I think you said 2?
So last year I had 2 clutches. The one clutch, all 9 babies lived. The second
Nice.
clutch, still don't know if it really was my incubator failing or if it was just the incubation process, but I only got 2 out of 11 eggs to hatch. And then this year I have 2 clutches. The one just hatched out. That was 9 eggs. I had 7 hatch out, so not all 9.
Okay.
And then I have 3 more eggs in the incubator. And then I have another female that I'm hoping drops some eggs. She was a little slow to the game. Didn't get the message in October when I started this process.
Nice.
So hopefully everything works out moving forward with the eggs. But it's
right.
Yeah, it's been another learning process too, trying to figure it out. And it's one of those things that, I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to Brett. I'm in Facebook groups. It doesn't seem like anyone's really put their finger on the right, incubation setup yet.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely want to get into egg care a little bit, but first I would love to just know a little bit more about your approach to breeding Womas in general. Do you like to do anything in particular in terms of cycling, or how do you like to approach that? Because clearly it works.
Yeah, I guess it does. I'm really lucky and unlucky because in Pennsylvania, we have all the seasons. So in October.
What is snow?
I know, you're like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
So in October, it naturally starts to get cool. So that's when I start my breeding process. And then, October, November, December, it's freezing cold. February's still freezing cold. March, we're getting a little bit warmer. April, May is when my eggs are hatching, or February is when they're laying, May is when they're hatching. So I don't do a night drop. My room does it itself.
Okay.
Which is a great thing, but I have a hard time controlling the temperature sometimes. So I don't have it in a house. I built it's pretty much in a barn.
Okay.
I turned my barn into my lizard room.
Nice.
When my husband was deployed, I had to put my reptiles somewhere because we moved out of our house. So I built this thing in my barn, and we have just a little like portable air conditioner and a heater. But the seasons really dictate what the temperature is in there. I can do is, I turn the heater on to get it about where I want it.
Right.
But in October, the nighttime temperatures are dropping into the 70s naturally.
Very
Uh,
cool.
so I
That, I
kind of
mean,
lucked out with that.
no, that's awesome in a way. Like, I feel like a lot of people at one level, we're all just trying to copy a real season. So the fact that you're just letting the seasons be seasons might
Yeah.
actually be better than, some people trying to do that themselves.
Yeah. And snow is a great thing too, because in November, December, January, that drop in the pressure signifies, okay, it's time to
Right.
breed them. And that, what more can you ask for? In
Yeah.
California, you're probably, I've seen some of your YouTube videos where you got the windows open, you've got
Yeah.
I just kind of let it do its thing in there.
That's great. Oh yeah. I definitely have to get a little creative if I want anything in the 50s for, Brettles or whatnot. But, like we're talking about, a lot of different ways to make it work depending on where you're at and whatnot. So would you say that usually it doesn't get much below 70? Like that's all the amount of cooling you've needed?
I've done like 67 is the lowest I go at night.
Okay.
And then by March, April time, the nights are back into like the mid 70s. And the daytime, I use push sensors. Do you ever hear of those?
I
Where
haven't
you
actually.
have them in my enclosures and it's connected to an app on my phone. And so I can monitor down to the degree of the temperature and the humidity in every single one of my enclosures. So I'm saying it with confidence that my temperatures are usually about like 88 degrees during the day, and then normally 75 at night. And then in the winters, it gets down to the high 60s at night.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And do you also tend to like to cycle food, or is that something that you're also a proponent of, or not so much?
I feed throughout the entire breeding season.
Wow.
If that's what you mean as far as cycling food.
Oh, sure. Whatever's true.
Yeah. So some people don't, like with a lot of other species of snakes, people don't feed them throughout the entire breeding season.
Right.
I took this upon myself. Like, this is something that I just do because it makes sense to me, but they can be cannibalistic. And so my thought is that if I feed them very small meals throughout the breeding season, both the male and the female, we're not going to have any issues. And I've also found that my females seem to bounce back way quicker than, like, let's say, a ball python that you haven't fed from October until March.
Right.
I know some other breeders that also feed, so it's not like forbidden to feed them. I don't think it's caused any issues, but some people don't feed them, and I like to have some assurance that they're
not starving.
Which I haven't ever heard of a real case of that happening in captivity. I've heard of blackhead pythons for sure in captivity, like firsthand stories of that happening.
Yeah.
So I just would rather be safe than sorry. And I also keep my male and my female, I think I put them together on a Monday. I separate them unless they're locked up on a Friday. And then I usually give them a week off, and then I do that again.
Very cool. No, that's awesome.
I've made this up. Like, this is not, I didn't find this in like Woma breeding 101. So I pretty much am just going with the flow at this point.
That's fantastic, and probably the best way to do it. And clearly it's, it's working for you. So that's great. And do you ever find, when you are continuing to offer food through that process, like, do gravid females ever reject taking it, or are they always just, I'm a Woma, I'm ready to go?
They stop about, that's actually a pretty good indication of when they're going to lay. With the last 4 females that have laid eggs for me, is like 2 weeks before they'll refuse a male, and then a meal, and then they'll lay the eggs. But they will take a meal all the way up to the very end. All of the Womas that I've bred will take a meal to the end.
Sounds like Womas.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's very cool. Nice. Okay. And then, so then we got eggs. And how do you like to set those up? And have you kind of learned anything talking about trial and error from your last couple seasons in terms of the egg care? Because of course that is one of the big points of mystery for Aspidites in general.
I'm still trying to figure it out for sure. I have
Mhm.
not, I can't say that I've like found the perfect solution. There's so many different ways that I've heard of people incubating. So there's something I've read, the boa morph method, where they literally bury the eggs in the incubation, the incubation substrate, and they uncover them the last 2 weeks. I thought about trying that, but I also know that there's an issue with moisture, and you don't
Right.
want to get these eggs wet at all. Like if I even see a little bit of moisture on the inside of the container, I will open the container and wipe it off, just because that's
Nice.
how paranoid I am. So I know that that's one possibility. I haven't tried that method yet. I might. Luckily, this isn't like if I mess up a clutch. Of course, I'd never want to mess up a clutch. That
Mhm.
I'm not banking on this for like my living. I have a full-time job. So I'm lucky that I think I can try some different things to hopefully help other people.
Mhm.
So that's something on my radar that I might try in the future. But this year, I used sim containers for the first time, and I really
Okay.
liked them. And then I did in one container water crystals. They still haven't hatched yet.
Oh.
I had 3 containers. The other container I did 50-50 perlite vermiculite with some water. And then the third container, I got this one from Brett Bender. He did some, I believe, I can't remember if it was dry perlite, some moistened vermiculite with another layer of dry perlite.
Right.
And I did something
Your
different in each container. And unfortunately, I wish I could say that all 3 of the eggs that I lost are in one of the containers, but they weren't. There was 2 in one container and 1 in the other container. So I was, kind of hoping that I could narrow it down and be like, well, that container, that incubation method is the one I doesn't work, but
Right.
I didn't
They
learn
all worked a little bit.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I've heard other folks talk about kind of losing those, odd eggs, no matter what incubation method they're doing, and the question of whether maybe just is that a problem with the incubation or was that a problem with the egg, and would it have died no matter what we tried? It's an interesting point.
The weird thing is, and I mean, we're just being open here, but
Mhm.
the one egg is exactly what happened to me last year, where the baby never made it out of the egg. So it was day 59. So like that's,
Wow.
it should be popping out. And I could smell it, and the egg looked just like it was overcome with moisture. Like you can see it's not that pearly white anymore. It's a little wet.
Mhm.
And I cut the egg open and the baby was dead. So it never made it out of the egg. For the first time, though, the other 2 fully came out of the egg. Their umbilical cord was absorbed, like everything. They looked fine, and they died in the container.
Hmm.
So
That is very
that
odd.
I haven't figured out what that's about yet.
Hmm.
I have no. I'm like puzzled by it still.
Mhm.
And maybe it is just circle of life, and they weren't meant
Right.
to live, but it
If
was
they
just
all lived, we'd have a
odd.
lot more Womas, right?
Yeah.
That is interesting though. And there was no obvious sign of anything wrong with those ones, huh? They just kind of crawled out
No,
and said
it
peace
looked
out.
perfect. Yeah. I have no explanation, so here I am yet again puzzled by the Womas.
Yeah. Wow. That is very, very odd. Hmm.
Yeah, I wish. And next year I'd like to breed my blackhead pair, but
I was gonna
that's a
ask.
whole other game. Like,
Yes. Let's let's hit on blackheads because it
yeah,
is a whole other thing.
yeah.
So you have 2? Do you have a
I have
pair or?
one pair. Yep, just
Okay.
one.
And so next year will be the first year that you're able to give that a go.
I hope so. Yes, I'm
Okay.
gonna give it a try. My
What are you
male is,
working with?
what's that?
Oh, I was just wondering what are you working with? I've seen the male, the really big one. What's the story for your girl?
The male is unknown. I don't know if I told you that before. I
Hmm.
don't know who produced him. I know he was produced in 2012. I got him as an adult. That's all I know about him. My female is from Jason Hood from
Nice.
his Swift line. And
Perfect.
She's got really nice, he explained it to me when I got her from him, that the K Brothers pythons, which I'm obsessed with watching their videos, they like to do the ocelot pattern on the sides of the Womas. Like that's something that I guess is, they aspire to breed. And this girl has a lot of that ocelot pattern throughout her body. So
very cool.
I'm not, this is one thing where I just have two and I'm going to breed them. It's not like with my Womas, I'm selectively trying to find pairs to match them up to get, higher contrast, more defined banding, something like that. But with the Blackheads, I'm just putting them together and I'm going to see what happens. I mean, and hopefully I get to I would love to get to the point where with my Blackheads that I'm at with my Womas, where I'm selectively picking them out, but this is what I have right now, and I'm going to give it a try. So
that's awesome. Do you tend to keep the Blackheads differently than the Womas? Is it pretty similar?
I keep them a little bit higher humidity than the Womas, only because in my head it makes more sense because of where they're from. When I say a little bit more humidity, I'm talking like 10% more humidity. I keep my Womas at between 40 and 50% humidity pretty consistently. And the Blackheads are like 50 to 60, maybe % humidity. Other than that, I keep them on the same, substrate. They have much larger enclosures, to say the least. No, I don't do a whole lot different between the two other than that.
Cool. Well, that's super exciting. I'm stoked to see how that goes for you next season. How old's the girl?
She was a 2016.
Okay, sweet.
So
should be rearing to go.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that a lot of people I don't think know the answer to, or maybe there's not an answer to, is when can I breed my female? A lot of people reach out to me and say, I have a pair of Woma pythons, like when do you breed your females? I think we've talked about this before. I don't know what the right answer is. I try to stick to like a 2,000 gram mark. To me, that makes sense looking at them physically.
Right. How that translates into their actual body condition.
Yeah. So I also think I've heard many people say 3 years old. So between 2,000 grams and 3 years of age, I would say is probably appropriate. But if you have a smaller looking female, maybe you wait a little bit. Like I have one female that just turned 3 years old. She's 2,100 grams. It was the first year I bred her. She only laid 5 eggs and 3 were fertile. So, I mean, she laid eggs, which is great, but you can see that's a little bit different than my 11-year-old female who laid 12 eggs. So, or 11 eggs.
Not quite as developed and not as good fecundity. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And talking about, the natural history for Womas and Blackheads, do you feed any different way because of what you've read researching them, or do you still kind of offer them more of like a mouse and rat centric diet, but maybe do different frequencies, different sizes? What do you like to do?
I wish that I could say I feed them reptiles because I know that that's what they would prefer, but I don't.
I don't know that anybody could,
I know.
Yeah.
So I'm sure some people do, but that's what they would eat in the wild.
Right.
But for my big male, I feed him the largest size mouse. I do not feed him rats because I've heard of a lot of liver issues with black-headed pythons as well as Woma pythons. You can easily overfeed them. They easily get overweight. I think them being overweight can hurt your breeding process. So I try to give them the leaner food item. I think a mouse has less fat than a rat does. Right. With that being said, some of my females, I feed female Womas. I still feed rats, like the girl you gave me, or I gave you. She, that you gave me.
I was gonna say, wait.
She is on rats, but some of my bigger looking animals I give mice.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do you ever offer chicks or quail or anything like that? Have you experimented with birds?
I
Or
have not.
okay,
No,
cool, cool.
no, I pretty much stick to the rodents for the most part. At some point, I will hopefully kind of diversify their diet a little bit.
Oh,
With some,
right on. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, that it's clearly, doing good. And I think that I've also heard the same thing in terms of mice proportionally being a little bit leaner. And so
Mhm.
I do the same thing for the most part. I don't do rats for blackheads and definitely haven't yet for womas, but yeah, very cool.
It also seems like every Woma that I've got from someone was feeding on rats, which is
Hmm.
interesting. So I've not changed it up
Hmm.
for some of the ones that I've gotten as juveniles or adults. It just seems like that's what people are feeding them. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you have a room full of ball pythons, whatever else, you're feeding them rats. So why not feed the Woma python rats as well?
Right. Yeah. No, totally. And it is probably at that level just a matter of being careful not to overdo it. I'm sure that you can feed rats in a way that is cautious so that they don't get obese and have those liver issues and whatnot, like you're saying. Just keeping an eye on how tubby they're getting.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing. Like you can get excited by how much they will eat. Like
Right.
I, just because they eat every day doesn't mean you should feed them every day. So my
Hmm.
adults I feed once every other week.
Okay.
That's again, I didn't read that anywhere. That's just what I think is the right thing to do, and it makes sense. And I've never, ever, ever had a Woma refuse a meal ever, not once, except for that last like 2 weeks of the breeding season.
I see. Yeah. Hey, you probably have a few that have never refused a meal and think everything is a meal too, right?
Exactly. I've never been bit by one of my Woma pythons, and I say that
Nice.
completely honest. I feel like people probably don't believe that because they have a bad reputation, but
Yeah, I
I
can't say
think
that.
you can see, like, as weird as this sounds, I kind of know the personalities of all of my animals, and I'm
Mm.
sure you do too,
Hmm.
to an extent. And when I have a Woma python out, I think people think they're gonna like strike and bite.
Hmm.
They will just kind of like slither on your arm and then just this, like
Yeah,
all of a sudden.
that's right.
And so I can kind of sense, I don't really let them in this area. I'll kind of just like move their head out of the way. And I also don't handle them a lot. Like,
Hmm.
yes, they are, I love them. You could call them a pet if you want, but I don't hold them. I don't really play with them. I clean their enclosures. Sometimes when I'm cleaning, I'll take them outside to take a picture, or I'll let them hang out for a couple of minutes. But they're also not animals that I'm just holding for
Right.
15, 20 minutes at a time.
You're not watching TV with them and booping
No,
their snoots.
no.
Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty funny though, the way that they do that rub and chomp. Like I think it's hilarious when people don't know what's coming with that. I was that person once. The first time I held a Woma, I was like, wow, it's like an actual like cuddly reptile. Oh, never mind. It's like- yeah. Nice. Well, that's awesome. And I do want to switch gears here pretty soon, but before I do, are there any other snake projects that you have besides the Asphodite stuff that you're excited about? Anything you want to talk about? I know you mentioned the Sumatrans. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's just been something kind of on my radar that I found Sumatrans to be really interesting pythons. I've done a little bit of research on them, and I was able to get a pair from Dave and Tracy Barker at
Nice.
VPI. So it's a caramel albino male and a possible het caramel albino female. So I'm hoping to do something with that in the future. I just always wanted to get a pair, one of those types of things.
For sure.
And then I love ring pythons, but as I'm sure you know, they're nearly impossible to find. I mean, there's
Right.
so little people that work with them. I think that they are also another species that is extremely hard to hatch out the babies and keep the babies
Mhm.
alive. I don't think it's so much the incubation; it's feeding the babies when they're hatched out of the
Mhm.
egg. So there's not a whole lot of them around. I was lucky enough to get my hands on one female, which I have, and I'm going to attempt to show her to you.
Oh my goodness,
Are
exciting.
so aggressive.
Yeah, they're not nice.
They are not nice at all.
That's one of the ones that tried to take my head off at GX3, actually.
Yeah, she has, yeah, I'm going to get bit on camera, so it's
okay.
fine.
If you'd like.
I haven't got bit by a Woma, but I've gotten bit by my ring python every single time I've had her out.
Don't feel pressured, but if you would like to do that, it will be a first on the channel.
Maybe I'll like go off to the side and let her bite me so she can bring her on the screen. But I was lucky enough, I don't have them yet. I've been waiting to get my hands on more ring pythons, whether it was a hatchling, whether it was a juvenile, an adult, and an adult pair popped up somewhere, and I purchased an adult pair. So I'm very excited to get those into my hands and hopefully do something with that in the future. So I'll have 2 females and 1 male ringed python for a project down the road. And I have 1 olive python, and he's more of just like my friend. If I ever came across another nice female specimen, I'd probably pick her up. But I just think olive pythons are so unique, and he's one of the ones that like I will handle a little bit more.
Nice. Yeah, he's beautiful. I've seen a couple pictures, and it's a really, really pretty olive. I mean, they all kind of look the same, but he's a nice one. Yeah. Well, that's cool too, that the rings are kind of also going to be a longer term project for you. It seems like there's a thing for banded pythons.
You know, I obviously, if this was a therapy session, I'd say I have some patterns in my my collection here.
No, that's great though. That's awesome. Very cool. If you're ready, I'm ready to do the show and tell thing and see what happens here.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So if you're joining us on podcasting services, I'm going to chop this part out, but you should definitely go visit the YouTube video. My channel is Centralian Exotics, and Kasey's about to show us some amazing reptiles. Let's do it. Nice.
So this is a baby I produced last year. And I don't know if I have a really, really high contrast, that super orange male that I have. This is one of his babies, and it's kind of, the camera does not give them justice, as I'm sure you're aware, but like it is really bright orange.
I can see that the banding really gets a nice orange flame as you get near the belly.
And he has a really unique, like, I don't even know what you describe this as. I just kept him because he was so different.
He is, yeah, he's beautiful. That is a stunning Woma.
And he's nice.
Yeah.
Which is a plus, but he's nice.
That's awesome. Awesome. How many did you keep back last year?
I only kept back 3.
Okay, nice.
Which I guess is a lot, but.
Well, you know, it's tough. So that's the cream of the crop right there. He's gorgeous.
Once you get him out, he's fine. Okay, I'm not joking. He's huge.
He is a large animal.
I mean, I can't even get him in the frame.
Wow.
This is
He is so pretty though. Like,
he's gorgeous.
He's got the wow factor with or without the size. Like those bands are just some of the cleanest that I've ever seen.
Yeah, you can hear he's not very happy.
And man, yeah, I know you said you don't really know much about his background, but he really does have some incredible contrast, kind of more like a Western.
Know who produced him?
Yeah. Damn. And was he pretty big when you acquired him?
He was I think I got him 3 years ago, so he was not that much smaller than this. And I've never weighed him, so I mean, I should, because I'd like to know how much he weighs. I mean, he's huge.
That is an incredible animal. Thank you for sharing him. He's special.
He is. It took a little bit of wrangling to get him out. Hold on 1 second. So I brought her because I've never bred her before. I've had her since she was a baby. I believe Barry Miller produced her. But she has almost like a patternless, can you see how she's almost patternless? So I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with her. But then the rest of her body has like a really unique pattern.
She's beautiful, and a good orange belly too on that.
Yeah, she's just really different.
I've seen some pictures of wild womas, brigalow ones, I think in particular, that really don't have much banding, kind of look more like her front half there. So that's awesome.
Really cool animal.
Really pretty.
I wish that I could show you some of my other Sailfins, but they would not, it wouldn't happen.
Okay.
So she's the nicest one I have. This is a hybrid. So she is Pustulotus times, I think she's Microlophus.
Okay.
She has like a really dark facial pattern there. I probably will never know, but this is a female too. So everyone who sees her goes, oh, why do you keep two males together? Because I had her at one point with a male. I said, this is a female. So usually females don't have this big of a sail here. She has a pretty decent size neck crest, but the crest on her nose is significantly larger than most females. Hold on.
He's trying to run right through everybody's computers at home, right to the camera.
I can show you. All right, calm down.
They are so pretty. Look at that.
She is pretty calm.
It's just they're literally dinosaurs. I mean, come on.
Press there. Yeah, she is so cool.
Amazing. And so you said she's your most friendly one, huh?
By far the most friendly. I mean, some of them, when you get them out and you basically let them know you're not going to murder them or eat them, they'll hang out like this. I shouldn't, say that they're super crazy, but then I have like my tribrid, his name is Axel, is batshit crazy. I mean, I cannot get him. If I have to get him out to clean the enclosure, I have to get gloves on. I have to like hold him down. They're all different, to say the least. Her, I can just put my arm in the enclosure and sometimes she'll just walk right into my hand.
Very cool.
Don't make fun of me for having a snake hook, but like you.
Oh, I would never I'd use a hook for everything.
I usually don't, but with her I do.
Yeah.
And she, again, like once you get her out and she knows you're not going to kill her, she's usually okay. But these guys musk. And it's kind of gross.
Man, look at that pattern.
She's squirmy.
She is so pretty.
They have a really nice iridescence too, and you're not going to be able to see it. But
and how old is she?
She is from 2019, produced by Don Patterson.
Oh, okay.
Apparently is a rarer ringed python bloodline, because most of the ringed pythons that we have in the United States, from my understanding, are from, I'm going to butcher his last name, Tom Keoghan. So not a lot of people have Don's ringed pythons. Okay.
She is very pretty.
She is, but she's not very nice.
It's too bad that they're typically such assholes, because they are stunning snakes.
And I guess that so she's a banded specimen, but they also have I don't know what you would describe it as, like a striped, where they have more like blotches on their side. So the pair that I recently purchased, one is banded and one is striped. So I'm kind of interested to see what that turns out to be in the future.
Absolutely. No, that's sweet. And you did it without getting tagged. Hell yeah.
That's a first. You must know I'm on camera.
Yeah, best behavior for the show. Well done. Cool. Well, if you are on the podcasting services, welcome back. Go check out the YouTube side of things, and let's move into the rapid fire if you're ready to do it.
I'll try my best.
All right. So some shorter questions here. That doesn't mean you have to answer them short, but these are kind of the ones that I wanted to ask, but they're not really good enough for their own segment. So here we go. So if you had to choose between your legged and non-legged reptiles, if you could only keep one or the other, what would you choose?
Oh my gosh, Woma pythons.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Sailfins.
I know. They're too high maintenance.
Nice. Very good. Okay. What is a common reptile or snake misconception that you particularly dislike? One that you really want corrected?
Definitely when it comes to the Aspidites in general, of them being mean or vicious or constantly biting. Like I told you earlier, I've never been bit by one. They want food, and the time that you get bit is, I think, when they're hungry or when you stick your hand in their enclosure and they think they're being fed. And I think that's a big misconception. They're not aggressive at all. I mean, you just saw me handle two of them without an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, None of mine are aggressive, to be quite honest. I'm sure there are specimens out there that are on the more aggressive side, but if you handle them correctly, don't put your hands in common sense things like don't stick your hand in their enclosure,
Yeah.
don't put your
Yeah.
hand in front of their head. They're not mean, and you're not going to
100%.
get it.
Oh, I agree. Any Aspidites bites that I've had have just been food bites,
Yeah.
In terms of actual like defensive strikes, I've been bit way more often than with ball pythons and corn snakes compared to a Woma. So great. That's a great one and super true. Okay. What is a species that you think is underrated in the hobby? Something that you think deserves more attention than it tends to get?
I mean, I'm just going to go with the Sailfin Dragons. I mean, they literally look like they're out of a book. They don't look real. And they're such an amazing species to keep as well if you keep them correctly. They are a little bit more high maintenance. That's not to say that I don't think people should keep them, though. We need more in the United States. And I think we need more people working with them. I think we need more people talking about them. And hopefully I can, produce some in the future. But I think they're so underrated. People always ask, what's that iguana? What species of iguana is that? They are their own thing.
Right.
And they are real, and they do exist.
They're not a Hollywood prop, but they could be.
And they, honestly, I say this truthfully with all of them, you can gain their trust. I'm sure there's a lot of other lizards out there that are the same way, but some of mine recognize me, and if my husband comes in the room, they freak out. So they're really rewarding to keep if you put in the time, the energy, and you kind of stick with it, and they're just really amazing.
Totally. That's cool. You hear that a lot more with lizards in terms of
Yeah.
like that cognition, actually being able to recognize the keeper. That's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. What has been your least favorite species to work with in your life, and why was that?
I mean, it's probably like leopard geckos or bearded dragons. And not that I don't like them, but they're just, we talked about it earlier. I didn't have the passion for them. They didn't strike my interest. I had a boa constrictor as well, and he was, really cool, but I just didn't have that. I'm looking forward to learning more. I'm looking forward to kind of what's next
Right.
with them. The same
Right.
that I do with some of the species that I keep right now. And I know you have the Aspidites fever, so you know what I'm talking about.
I completely do. And it's so important. I think that people really should try to focus more on figuring out what their thing is. If you're just keeping because that's what the internet said you should keep, you're not doing yourself a favor. Right. So
Exactly.
100%. Awesome. Do you have a favorite individual animal in your collection?
Yeah, it's probably Damien, my big Sailfin dragon. I mean, he's massive. I got him. He was born on 666.
There you go. It's perfect.
He was produced by Scott Corning, and then I got him from John Steele, and he was the most aggressive animal I've ever had most aggressive lizard I've ever owned. I mean, I could look at him through the enclosure and he would just hurt himself, just bash into the wall, whip his tail. And over the process of, I don't know, three years, I'd let him go. You know, I'd put food in, I'd change his water. I tried not to interact with him. And I'm at the point now where I can stick my hand in, I can pet him. He goes on my arm. I mean, it's so rewarding.
That's awesome.
It just, I think the time and effort that I put into him makes him my favorite.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so cool. A real bond, right, with a reptile like that, where you know that you actually had a difference in its entire behavioral profile. Like, that's amazing.
Which non-reptile people are probably like, what? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
100%. 100%. Okay. What is something that current Kasey wishes she could tell beginning keeper Kasey? Maybe save yourself some trouble.
Oh, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things. Probably the number one thing would be, don't get everything.
That's a good one.
To other people who are listening too, like, more is not better by any means. We all do it. I think every single person in the hobby gets everything. You get excited about stuff. You see something online, you want it, and then all of a sudden you have way too much in your collection and you can't afford, number one, to feed it all, care for it all, house it all. Plus, they're usually babies that you're getting, and they grow up and bigger enclosures.
That whole thing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they do get bigger.
Right.
But just you don't need it all right away. And I'd say to myself, like, learn more first. And if you really are passionate, after learning, after digging deep, I'm not talking about Reptiles Magazine care sheet. Like, dig deep into the species you're interested in and make sure it's something that you're passionate about, because I hate to see neglected animals too. You know, not that I've necessarily not cared for an animal, but I've certainly not done as much for some as others because I wasn't as passionate about them and because I had too much.
Right. No, 100%. Yeah. Great points. That's all super important. Do you have a favorite non-reptile animal? Non-reptile animal?
I don't know. That's a good question.
It's fine if not. That's a good answer too.
I like reptiles.
Yeah.
I'm not really a cat or dog person. Reptiles is where it's at for me.
There we go. I love it. All right. Do you have somebody that you look up to most in herpetoculture?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people. So many people. I mean, Scott Corning, number one for Sailfin Dragons. Like, what an amazing, amazing job he's done. He's been working with them for, I'm going to go ahead and say, like 30 years.
Wow.
GX3, like Riley and Grant. I mean, I've been watching, I got a plush gelatis from Grant quite some time ago. And I've watched where he was at to like where he's at now with that amazing shop. And I mean, I could only dream to be in that position one day. And all of his animals, I mean, I haven't been to their store, but I can see that they're well cared for, that they're passionate about what they do. They've gone above and beyond. It's not just a reptile store, in my opinion. Like, I'd 100%. Love to visit it one day.
Yeah, and that's totally the vibe I got from it too. And now actually having like helped out there, like, it's actually true. Like, it's a pretty amazing place. You should definitely visit sometime.
I'm in the neck of the woods.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy, just, you know.
Yeah, California.
California. Awesome. What is the worst reptile decision that you have ever made? Reptile related.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I want to say some things. No, I'm just kidding. With the Sailfin Dragons, and this is like one thing I tell everybody who's interested in them now, do not put mesh like chicken wire or anything like that on your enclosures. And I learned the hard way because my tribrid now is missing the whole top of his crest, because they, like some other lizards, do not understand boundaries of their enclosure. And if they are stressed out, they will continually hit their face, or in his case, he was jumping into the top of the enclosure that I had custom made, and the top had chicken wire, and just rubbing his, and it happens overnight. Like any time I've seen a Sailfin dragon that has, you know, any sort of damage to their nose or their crest, it happens within a matter of hours. It's not something that you see happening over a long period of time. So probably just customizing my enclosures to what I know now. I wish I could have done them like that 10 years ago.
Got it. All right. And then the last one I have for you is just the classic. What is the number one piece of advice that you would offer to new keepers, beginners that are listening in right now, who are just getting into all of this reptile business?
It costs money.
Turn back now, save your money.
Money. Like I again, I don't ever want to be mean, but I hate it when people ask me if they can do payment plans for my animals. And I say, no, I don't do that, because you need to be able to afford the animal. You should also have money set aside for vet bills.
Right.
I spend thousands of dollars at the vet, like over the past few years, for minor things, you know, whether it's a checkup, or sometimes if I get a new animal, I'll take it to get just checked out to make sure everything's okay, because I don't have the privilege of quarantining. I have, like, I know you're in an apartment,
right?
You can probably put them in a different room. I have one room, so my quarantine is like on the other side of the room, so I need to be safe.
You don't have two barns.
No, I don't have two barns, but it costs money. And even if you don't have a business, put a budget into place. Like, how much does it cost to feed them? How much does rats cost? How much does mice cost? How much do crickets cost? How much does, you know, your electric bill cost?
That's one that people don't think about very often. Yeah.
A lot of money to keep them. And I hate to see people breeding to make money for their business too. Like, if you can do it, that's great, but don't like force things, or don't breed things too early just because you're tight on money for food. Luckily, I'm in a position where I have budgeted for a long time, and every dollar that I make does go back in, but I'm not in a position where like I can't feed my animals if my Woma pythons don't hatch out. But I just please to people, like, budget and understand that they cost a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's very true. And that's another thing that kind of unfortunately is a learning curve. So letting people know ahead of time to kind of avoid, because that's something where you don't want it to be trial and error. You never want to run into the point of error when we're talking about, you know, the choice between a vet bill, or, you know, like not having enough capital to take care of your animals properly. So that's a really good one. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. For sure.
Something we don't want to have to think about,
but it's true, you know. It is the reality. This, if you want a cheap hobby, this isn't it.
No.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in the Blackheads.
Oh, I know. You're telling me.
More than I do, so.
I know. I mean, I can assure you that I'm doing it as responsibly as I can, but also, like, you know, there's sacrifices.
Oh, there are. Trust me, I know. Sometimes I don't eat so that they can eat.
Yeah, exactly. I don't regret it, though. I'll tell you what, the Blackheads are what I look to first every time I get home now. Like, I love the Brettles, I love the Womas, but I just am absolutely obsessed with everything about the Blackheads.
And whether we do it now or when we're done with this, I really need you to show me that one Blackhead that you got from Jason. I know.
Oh yeah, I can do that.
Show and tell time, but I really want to see that Blackhead.
She shed last night, actually, so it's perfect. She's gonna be looking. Should I just go get her right now? Like, we can include this.
Please.
Okay, I'll be right back. There we go.
Oh my gosh. You got so lucky.
I know.
I'm so jealous.
I I
Wow.
feel incredibly lucky. She is super, super special. And it really is lucky because the only reason that she was even available is because when Jason moved, she stopped eating for some reason. Kasey, thank you so much for joining me and doing this. It's been a great time, and I have learned a lot, especially about the Sailfin. So I hope this was a good time for you. And where can people that are listening find you if they would like to track you down and hit you up?
I am on Instagram at Zion Exotics. I'm on Facebook. And I do have a website, which is not up yet. It is going to be more of a educational resource as opposed to selling animals. Uh,
Nice.
I don't sell a lot. I keep back a lot of things. So that's where you can find me. And I really do appreciate you having me on here. And it's so nice to talk to someone else and geek out about Aspidites. I could seriously talk for days about them. So I
Oh,
appreciate
same.
you kind of go off on a rant here.
100%. No, I really appreciate your time. You are great, and it is a pleasure to talk to you. And we should actually just talk for like 6 hours. We should do a round table.
Oh my,
Let's
hey, I'm in.
snag Brett. Let's snag all these Aspidites people, and just have like our own little private symposium.
Anytime we can talk about Aspidites with anyone, I'm in.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Everybody listening, check out Kasey, Zion Hill Exotics, and